February 26, 2026, Sonny Styles put together arguably the most impressive athletic display in the history of the NFL Combine. Weighing in at 6'5", 245 pounds, he ran a 4.46 40-yard dash, broad jumped 11 feet and 2 inches, and vertical leaped 43 and a half inches. The first player ever with a combo of a sub 4.5 40, an 11 plus foot broad jumped, a 40 plus vertical leap, and at the size of 6'4" and 240 plus pounds. Now, Styles was a 5-star recruit out of Ohio, but with the Buckeyes, he kept growing until he just became too big to play as safety. Who does that remind you of? Back in the year 2000, there was a hybrid safety linebacker who even returned punts and played wide receiver. He had athletic gifts and scored 7 touchdowns for New Mexico. He amassed 442 tackles, 11 forced fumbles, was a 2-time first-team All-American hybrid safety linebacker player and the Mountain West Player of the Year in 1999. Now, in order to show and portray the significance of this equation of talent, Brian Urlacher to Sonny Styles, I gotta admit to you, I grew up a Brian Urlacher and Chicago Bears ultimate football fan. And to prove it, there's a couple ways I can. I got a Brian Urlacher Hall of Fame hat when he was younger. Got a Brian Urlacher jersey that I got a couple of years ago. He's my favorite all-time Chicago Bear. I got this jersey when I was a little kid, and I've got this bobblehead that I think that my uncle gave me right here. The Brian Urlacher bobblehead that I had at least a decade ago. I was the ultimate fan, one of those people. So this isn't just some sort of light words, empty thing to say that this is an all-time kind of comparison. Now, this is real significance here to make this, and I'm not just saying this to try and make any assumptions here about the potential of what a guy like Sonny Styles is. That is how special this comparison looks. This signifies what kind of talent this player is coming out of Ohio State and how special he is. Now, at the NFL Combine in 2000, Brian Urlacher was 6'4", 258 pounds, and he ran a screaming 4.57 40-yard dash. He vertical leaped 34 inches and broad jumped 10 feet and 2 inches. It was one of the most impressive athletic displays for a huge person with incredible stature and traits that was rangy. You got to remember here, Urlacher, what we talked about, played wide receiver in high school and safety, but in college he just continued to grow and get larger. And the equation of his talents and what he put on the field allowed him eventually to be selected 9th overall by the Chicago Bears franchise to become the next great linebacker, the next Mike Singletary, who's a Hall of Famer, the next Dick Butkus Hall of Famer. And that's exactly what he was. He was the Rookie of the Year in 2000 for defense. He had 8 sacks, over 125 total tackles that season. He was incredible, immediately an impact player. In 2005, he was the Defensive Player of the Year, the face of the Chicago Bears franchise for a decade plus. One of those rare trait players that you just could not turn the corner on. If you were a tight end, a running back, coming out of the backfield and you tried to run through Brian, couldn't do it. You tried to gain a step and turn the corner on him, you just did not have a chance to do that, which was amazing because of the size that he possessed. And he went on to play 13 seasons, 8-time Pro Bowler, 4 times he was a first-team All-Pro, amassed 1,361 tackles, 42 sacks, 12 forced fumbles, 85 passes defended, which is actually the second most all-time behind London Fletcher, if you remember that name. And that's one below London Fletcher's career mark, and Fletcher actually played 42 more games than Urlacher, which just goes to show you the range, the ability that Urlacher possessed as a guy that could cover, that could defend, and be a linebacker in coverage, and be in space, and defend. It was really impressive to see a guy that had that much ability as a blitzer, as a cover in in space, being able to go sideline to sideline. 22 interceptions to go along with 138 tackles for loss. Brian was inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame in 2018. Now, there's a couple of games that you simply just remember from his career back in 2010. It was 15 years ago. I remember a game against the Philadelphia Eagles. It was a huge one against Chicago. Vic went on to be the comeback player of the year. The Bears went to the NFC Championship game, and seeing that in person, I was a pretty young kid at the time, and Urlacher was well and above my favorite player beyond anyone. And seeing him in person, flying around the field, making plays, not allowing Michael Vick to be the player that you thought he potentially could be, and him defending Vick. And this is the later part of Brian's career. He only played 2 seasons after 2010, and yet there was still no space. There were so many things talked about with Vick and what he could do athletically, and Urlacher kept up with him. I remember talking to Michael Vick in person and asking him who the toughest player he ever faced was, and I asked him about that same time. And speaking of Brian Urlacher, and he said that was one of the most impressive guys he ever played against and toughest players, and how much fun he had to play against. So that was really cool. Remember moments like the 2010 NFC Championship game where Brian Urlacher intercepts the pass. Sports Science does a study on how difficult it was for Urlacher to intercept Rodgers and give Chicago a chance. This is all to say that this is one of the most impressive athletes, arguably, in the history for any sense of position. With that type of size, that speed, the strength, 27 reps at 225 pounds, and the ultimate competitor to be a face of the franchise kind of player. Now, Sonny Styles and what he just did, the historical weight of what it is now, I think this is the one. And you say this is the one, you really have to dig deep and look at what the potential is for this kind of player and to truly give him a little bit of the comparison. Now, some are aware that the Buckeyes were historically good on defense the last 2 years. Styles, as a significance of his leadership, he was given the block O, the ultimate symbol for Ohio State's defense. That was before the 2025 season. The Buckeyes led the country in yards and points allowed the last 2 years. And he amassed 182 total tackles, 17 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, 8 passes defended. So you already see the combination to, all right, he's got the size, he's got the the traits going sideline to sideline. But what about production? NFL scouts, they love traits. Guys that are rangy, that are tall, that can jump, that can run, that are physical. Play at the line of scrimmage, tackles for loss, get after the quarterback and disrupt. Play in space as a defender and cover different guys. And then passes defended where he can run and tackle and cover in space. He missed just 2 tackles this past season. And this is a guy that produced with some of the best players in the country. Tyleik Williams, Caden McDonald, first rounders, Caleb Downs, Arvell Reese. All of these players, and amongst these first round talents, he stood out in a way of physical traits that was so unbelievable. The only way to compare it is to a true all-time great. And I think that's really what's so fun of having a hat like this that I remember my uncle gave me when he visited the Hall of Fame, and he bought this Brian Urlacher sort of hat that we're going to put on right here and just talk about, because it's fun when you can make something like this and you can share a nature of your experience and talk about the weights of a player that was amazing and near and dear to you, and you can step aside and appreciate greatness and what it is, the amazing talent that someone put on the field, and seeing it before your eyes. There's few players that had Urlacher's size, strength, speed, awareness as a really cerebral player, and being in the right space all the time. Those ball skills where he was a wide receiver. And so that led him to have all of those interceptions and having one-handed catches, jumping, diving plays, and impacting the football and so many games just because he had excellent hands. And then he was a guy that at times he was the best player on the field in over half the games that he played in. And so the most fascinating part of this really is the position change. As that he was a safety in the same way that Sonny Styles was. And his size required him to be at the line of scrimmage. And the added weight didn't make him less explosive. It made him more explosive because he could stop the run. That he wasn't losing ground or strength when guys would contact him. Look, Sonny Styles squatted 675 pounds. He was number 10 on Bruce Feldman's freaks list. He ran over 23 miles per hour. So that's what we're all trying to get at here, is an appreciation of talent. There's no guarantee that Styles is going to become a Hall of Famer, one of the all-time greats. But there is something now where every year there's 50 plus players that have over 100 tackles. And I do believe that he's one that could do it as long as he's healthy every single season with ease, putting together because of that range, physicality, the pure genetics of him, experience with his linebacker coach in James Laurinaitis. There's so many factors in what the league is, so many really talented players, and with his profile, there's no team in the NFL that would not take Sonny Styles on their roster. He's just that type of talent. The on-field ability, right, of him moving around, watching the NFL Combine, and seeing how fluid he is moving, turning and running, lateral quickness, side to side, that range, that length. You can just imagine in the middle of the defense, him putting those arms in the air and leaping, and then his high school background of basketball where he's leaping and he can dunk a ball that's over 12 feet. It almost reminds you of Dwight Howard's sort of athletic ability, dunking a basketball at almost 13 feet, around 3 feet above the rim. And I saw him in person, 2024, November. I watched Northwestern versus Ohio State up close and wanted to see guys like Downs and Jeremiah Smith, and Styles was one of those players. He was playing at number 6 at the time. Cody Simon wore the block O, and I remember thinking, oh my goodness, that's it. That's a prototype what an NFL player looks like. And Sonny Styles was 19 at the time watching Ohio State play Northwestern. And there was Arvell Reese, and there was Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Smith. So it turns out you're seeing all of these players, and many of them could wind up being greats, especially all-time Ohio State greats. But it just brought me back to a kid seeing Urlacher in person, that sideline to sideline ability, turning and run and hitting. And then you combine the leadership element, because there is that. There's the fantastical nature of some of these guys, the bigger than life personality. And that's exactly what Urlacher kind of was. There was never sort of the off the ball stuff. Styles is a quiet guy. He was even upset that his 40-yard dash wasn't a 4.45 or better. That is, vertical leap wasn't 45 inches or better. He wanted to be even better than what he was. And having a teammate like Arvell Reese, who ran a 4.46, that pushed him and that allowed him to do better. And he was a guy that lost sprints. That Jeremiah Smith could wind up being better than all of the Buckeyes in history. he was losing sprints consistently. Ryan Day has talked about how every single sprint would be won by Jeremiah Smith, and having those kinds of players just allows you to be fostered in a culture of improvement. And that experience of Urlacher playing with Charles Peanut Tillman and Lance Briggs, Julius Peppers, all of these incredible players, guys like Lance Briggs and Tillman in the Hall of Very Good, and then you've got Hall of Famers like Peppers, Devin Hester, the special teams unit that they made up and they had. And in the biggest of moments, Urlacher delivered. So did Sonny Styles. This past year in the Big Ten championship game, 12 tackles, and was just known, this is just a playmaker. And if there's one sort of guy to identify in the 2024 CFP and Ohio State's defense showing up, you could think of JT Tuimoloau or Jack Sawyer, but in the middle, Caleb Downs, Sonny Styles, they brought together something special and played unbelievable defense. And I think that number 9, where Urlacher was selected by the Chicago Bears, is as low as someone would let him drop to. And that's because of the value what a guy like this provides and just being one of those rare all-time kind of talents athletically. The Seahawks traded up from 52 to 35 to take Nick Eamon-Warry, runner-up to Rookie Defensive Player of the Year, Super Bowl champion for Seattle. The Texans, they took Stroud at 2. They decided we're going to trade up for number 12 to number 3 and take Will Anderson Jr. because he's just a guy we cannot allow someone else to take. And that's what I'm predicting this upcoming draft. We could very well be wrong, and someone takes him in that top 10, and the pick lays where it is, but also that someone's just going to take a swing because of that innate athleticism that he produces. And someone that's at that size, 6'5", 245, that's even got another 10 or so pounds on that frame, or he can add on and continue to grow into that frame because he is so lengthy. You just look at him and the way that linebackers are. Roquan Smith, 6'1", 235 pounds, and ran a 4.51. Freaky athletic. He was expected to be the next kind of Urlacher. Tremaine Edmonds comes to mind at 6'4.5", 250 pounds plus, and was a very good player. Just didn't turn out to be that guy. Fred Warner, the best linebacker in the league. And you look at all of these guys' size. Sonny Styles is as big, as strong as any of these inside linebackers in the NFL right now with the length. There's no linebackers taller than 6'5". The biggest linebackers are now in the league is 250. So he's as big as any of them, and he is already the most athletic off-ball backer in the entire league, and it's simply amazing to see something like that really materialize here. So it's just going to be a matter of enjoying. Let me know down below in the comments what you think. If this truly is a comparison that is worthy, and I think I've shown enough here to exemplify that this is a special kind of a player that's going to come along, and it's something that you just need to enjoy. It may be hard for Bears fans or Brian Urlacher all time, guys, that he was one of their players to come up with this comparison and to allow it. I fully understand if those of you, some are not able to accept it, but I truly don't know if there are bigger fans of Brian Urlacher that have watched the game than someone like me. And at times, you just got to tip the cap and say that this kid has that sort of potential, and you hope that he can rise to the occasion and really be that kind of player and reach his full potential. Because that's what it's about here at Blitz with Blender, is guys having the careers that they are meant to, having a lot of success, working hard and reaching their aspirations, and that's what we're truly trying to get to here. If there's another guy that you think is another good comparison of what he could be, let me know down below in the comments. What do you expect from a career from Sonny Styles? Where does he go in this ultimate NFL draft? And what is his floor? What's his ceiling? What could he be? I'm going to put it as Brian Urlacher, that he could be a perennial Pro Bowl, All-Pro kind of guy. Could potentially be a Hall of Famer. The traits are there, the athletic profile's there. Now it's just a matter of the right fit and how he produces at the next level. So thank you so much for watching this Blitz with Blender video. My name is Josh Blender. I make college football and NFL content every day. So that's why it's so much fun to do the intersection, right, between college and the NFL at this time of the year, because we do so much work on college and the NFL that this part of the draft, there's that intersection. We get to do a lot of focus on that. So if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe. I will see everyone next time. Thank you so much for watching.
Best player in college football.
That Georgia and Ohio State game, New Year's Eve, is going to be a classic.
Josh Blender, hi everybody, I'm Josh Blender.
To the 40, 35, 30, Espinosa to the 20.